The purpose of this film is to introduce you to a few sound concepts and to give you a couple of tips when working with sound in Final Cut Pro 10. When you're working with sound, you want to create a unified sound world where everything in the film sounds as if it's part of the same reality. That is, unless you're going to go for a specific effect to jar your audience out of what they're seeing. To show sound files in operation and in context, we'll be using a film that I made a few months ago about a local art project called Thank. The techniques and approaches that follow are only suggestions. They're not necessarily the definitive ways to do things. There are many other ways to work with sound. These are simply the ones I've picked up or worked out. I try to stay open and adaptable in my practice to incorporate other ways of working should I find one that's better. If you have any other ways to approach any of the techniques identified in this film, I'd love to hear what they are. There are two types of files that we'll be working with in this film. The first type is a video file, which contains both video and audio information joined together. These files tend to be .mov or .mp4 files, amongst many, many others. This is the sort of file that a DSLR camera is likely to record, where the audio and video are synchronized together, having been recorded in the camera itself at the same time. The second sort of file is one which contains audio alone. These files tend to be .wavs or .mp3s, amongst others. I would recommend that whenever possible you work with .wav files, as they contain no compression, unlike MP3s, which are the sound equivalent of a vacuum-packed meal. Spaceman food. If you work with MP3 files at any point, please be conscious that they are already compressed, and if you compress your video file to get it up online, the audio will be compressed even further, and will become distorted and decrease in quality. The Final Cut interface allows you to run your cursor along sound files to hear what they sound like. You can do this in the clip window and down the timeline. In general, if you're just working on video and not focusing especially on sound, I'd suggest that you turn audio scrubbing off, as it's likely to melt your brain with its constant noise. To change the volume level of a clip, you drag this solid line either up for louder or down for quieter. To see a decent-sized audio meter, click once on the small audio meter here, and that will bring up a much bigger one here on the right-hand side of the timeline. When working with audio, you want to be very careful to keep it within certain levels. If the sound is too loud, we lose the information in what is called peaking. That's when the levels go from green up to yellow and then into the danger zone of red. Peaking sounds horrible. You want to avoid it at all costs. To take the edge off sound files that peak, you can either lower the overall volume of the clip or bring down the individual portions of the clip that are peaking. To bring down the individual portions of the clip that are peaking, I'd recommend using keyframes. Keyframes are great. They allow you to do so much across the whole world of Final Cut, with both audio and video. Zoom in nice and close to make sure you're being as precise as you possibly can. You insert keyframes by taking the playhead to the point that you want to look at, clicking into the clip and hovering your cursor over the volume line and pressing Alt and K together. This drops a keyframe in where your playhead is. Do it again, right beside the first keyframe. This puts in a second keyframe. Now move your playhead to the other side of the offending piece of sound. Drop 2 further keyframes in. Click the volume line in the centre of the keyframes and bring it down until the sound is more even and not peaking. When you work with audio recorded from within the camera, the sound is synchronized with the video that you see. When you're working with audio from a separate source, such as a sound recorder, you'll have to synchronize, or sync for short, in one of two ways. The first is by using Final Cut's auto-syncing function, which makes life very easy. But sometimes, you'll have to sync your audio manually. This, although a footer, can be quite good fun to get right. Isolate the audio that matches the video clip you're working with. I sometimes put in a wee marker using the M key to match the 2 points together. This is useful if you're working with larger sound clips. Drop the audio clip down onto the timeline below the clip you want to synchronize with and move it backwards and forwards, either using the cursor or nudge it a wee bit each way with the comma and full stop buttons on your keyboard. The comma moves it to the left before the playhead, and the full stop moves it to the right ahead of the playhead. When working with manually synced audio, don't forget to take out the volume from the original clip. Otherwise it'll sound really weird.
Possibilities that we have, like especially when we talk about this side here that we're trying to.
Working with fades is a vital part of creating an even sound world for your film. A sound clip can be left as it is, with its hard edges, or it can be faded in and out. Fading in and out adds a more even feel to the sound, and takes the abrupt edges off it. To fade a clip in, take your cursor to the left edge of the clip. You should see a little slider appear. Notice how your cursor becomes a pair of arrows facing left and right. Click and drag the slider into the clip. The shaded area that comes before the slider will be turned down, and the volume of the clip will rise as the playhead moves along it, following the line of the shadow. To fade a clip out, take your cursor to the end of the clip and drag the slider on that clip edge back to where you want to place it. These are just straightforward fades. There are other options open to you for fading that allow you to get into greater detail with your sound work. Take your cursor to the slider on the left-hand side of the clip. When the cursor turns into the little arrows, use your right click to open up a menu, which allows you to change the shape of the fade. Each of these fades has their own use. Play around with them to see what they do. The S-curve fade is particularly useful. It's a great way to balance sound together so that you don't notice the transition from one sound clip to the next. There's no drop in presence. They just slide over into each other seamlessly, keeping your audience in the world of the film. Nature and the environment. She identifies herself as a landscape artist, though not in the traditional. Sometimes when you're working with a piece of footage, there may be two brilliant bits of footage that you want to put together, but they may be at separate ends of a clip. For the purposes of your film, you may want to join them together as one point, respecting the speaker's intent, obviously. One way of doing this is to cover over the audio cuts with a visual cutaway. Using the audio techniques we've looked at, we can make it feel as if it's properly sequential.
About, how we use landscape and what are the possibilities that we have,
The use of a second source of audio can be a very good way to hide the join too. In this example, I use the noise of a crowd to cover over an audio edit. The audience should be totally oblivious to your edit. It should just feel like a complete thing.
Are the possibilities that we have, especially when we talk about this side here that we're trying to encourage the local community to use this as an educational space.
Final Cut has many filters that you can use to give your sound greater life and definition. To use a filter on your sound file, or files, select your clip or clips, and then choose the filter that you wish to work with. You can test the filter out by clicking on it once, and then pressing the spacebar. This will give you a preview of the modified sound. To apply it to the clip, or clips, double tap it. To change the parameters of the filter, go into Explorer, choose the Audio tab, and experiment with the settings until you find the sound that you like. If this custom-made setting is one that you're going to use again and again, on your film or another project, you can save it as a preset for further use by clicking Save Effects Preset. The filter can then be chosen from amongst the other filters down below. When pulling your film together, you want the sounds to be all roughly at the same level so that there's no up and down seesawing feeling of loud to soft in your film. This process is called normalisation. There's a number of ways to do this. You can export your files to an external sound editor such as Audacity or Logic. Or you can do it by eye in Final Cut, making sure that everything balances out. If you want to get a bit more technical, you can use the adaptive limiter filter and tweak that. I hope this short film has been useful to you. If you have other ways to work with sound, or if you think some of the techniques explored in this film are too long-winded or not effective enough, I'd love to hear how you work. The more people that chip in and comment in the comments section below, the better. Please feel free to provide links to tutorials that you think would be valuable for anyone wanting to explore the world of sound further. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments section below or email them to me on youthartsfilm@gmail.com. I'm Alistair Satchell, and this video has been brought to you from Argyll Youth Arts, which is part of the Time to Shine initiative from Creative Scotland. Thank you for your time.